Hi, my name is Michaela Lamb Hall, and the topic that I've chosen to discuss this quarter is Hanoi, Vietnam in the time period of 1950 to 1980. So, specifically, what I have focused on is how the war has affected Hanoi during this time period and how it devastated the region. In this podcast, we're going to be discussing sports in Hanoi and Vietnam in particular in this time period. In Vietnam, football has always reigned supreme. The introduction of football in Vietnam traced its roots in 1896 during the era of French Cochinchina. At the early stage, sports are only played among French civil servants, merchants, and soldiers. The French then encouraged local Vietnamese to play football and several other sports to divert interest from the politics of the French, especially since Vietnamese were starting to get more and more bothered by the French influence and the French having so much of a hold over the country as a whole. So they essentially used football to try and distract Vietnamese people of the hold that they had over their country. So it was introduced very early, and regardless, it became insanely popular very, very quickly. Through the early 1920s, 30s, the 40s, it actually really helped to unify the country with the Vietnamese League that they had, the Vietnamese Federate League. So the time period from 1950 to 1980 is where it gets very, very interesting because they had one league that actually became two. So with North and South Vietnam splitting, we now had North Vietnam and Hanoi specifically in one different league, while South Vietnam went into another. So the most popular player during this time period of around 1950 to 1960 is Lee Cong Vinh, and he helped the South Vietnamese team go to the AFC Cup, so the Asian Federation Cup, which is a bunch of Southeast and Asian countries. The North Vietnamese and Hanoi's team had no standout players in particular. The team was not good and only played other communist-led countries, so there were very few competitors, no one that would really challenge the team as a whole to perform better. So North Vietnam did not have a very good team at all. The game is played like normal football, or how we call it in America, soccer, where football is all about, the positions, the strategies, the tactics. So the goalkeeper, defenders, midfielders, and the strikers. The goal is to make sure that the striker on the other team does not score a goal, essentially. The goal is to make sure, So essentially what you're trying to do is trying to keep the defenders and the midfielders to stop any striker on the other team from coming on your side. So football became so popular during this time period because of the Vietnam Football Federation splitting in half. So South Vietnam team in the late 1950s was one of the 4 teams to make it to the final round of the 1956 Asian Cup, and they made it again in 1960, and they got in 4th place both times. So the teams during this period is so interesting how it went from one unified team, just like one unified country, to 2 very divisive teams who were played in completely different leagues, did not really interact much with each other. So it was very interesting to see the difference that this had in the country overall and also in the morale of normal people. So now we're going to get into the podcast portion of events and talk more about how other countries and compare Vietnam with Shenzhen, China, and Italy as well, to see how these countries are different and similar in that they both play football and enjoy football as a national pastime.
So hi, I'm Men Yi, and today my topic is about Shenzhen, China, and how its economic growth flourished through the 1980 to 2000.
Hello, my name is Samantha, and my project is focusing on water quality in Venice from the 1900s to 2010.
That's awesome. I'm Michaela. Nice to meet you both. And the topic that I've focused on this quarter is Hanoi, Vietnam during the Vietnam War era, 1950 to 1980. So essentially just seeing how the country was so affected and devastated by the Vietnam War raging on is what I've focused on. So actually, we're going to kind of go into a different topic today. We're going to talk about sports in each of our countries during our time period. So let's just dive right in. So tell me, Minyi, what were the origins of football in your city, in Shenzhen?
So in Shenzhen and in China as a whole, football has been played for thousands of years, and it actually started with a sport called suju in ancient China as a training game for the military. It was used for soldiers or military or anyone to practice their skills in like footing or anything, and it is similar to today's football played in China.
Oh, that's really cool. So it kind of has just developed in popularity over time, essentially.
Yes, and before it was just as like kicking. There wasn't like rules and anything to it. It was just kind of like a pastime too.
Oh, cool. Very cool. What about you, Sam?
Well, football's always been played in Venice. There's like a huge football culture in Italy, and football's been played in Italy specifically for hundreds of years. They have a league called the Federazione Italiana Glucata Calcio, or for short, the FIGC, and it's a national soccer association. And it was founded in 1898, and has only grown in popularity and size since then. So they've like really added a lot of teams, especially like even like little islands like Venice have like got their own team and like added on to the whole like national culture
Wow,
of football.
that's really cool. Would you guys say in both of your countries it's kind of been like a dominating sport, like popularity-wise?
For sure, China's main sport I would say would be football, since it has been played so many thousand years.
Yeah, I think mine has been really major, but it kind of shifted because it went from like water sports to football, and now football is like the main sport in Venice now.
That's awesome. So just leading off of that question, when did it become so popular? And is it still? So I know that you did just both kind of answer that, but when exactly was the, I don't know, major event or time period that really boosted its popularity? If you want to go first, Sam.
Football became popular when the team rose to the top Italian league. And the top Italian league is called Serie A. And they basically became popular because after 30 years of being in lower divisions of the professional soccer, they finally made it to the A team. So it's still popular because the team is gaining players that have like previous experience and like trading and actually like being with others, players that were in different teams before. And therefore it's like increasing the popularity because the players are popular and they have like followings from other teams, and they've also improved the team's rank
Wow.
a lot. Yeah.
So it was kind of it was in a lower division for 30 years until it rose up. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a long time.
Yeah, took a long time to get to the top.
Yeah.
What about What about you, Menyi, for Shenzhen?
So for Shenzhen, I think football has been pretty popular since the ancient times, but it was only until like the late 1900s where like rules and guidelines were created to make the game of football. So I would say that in the late 1900s, where there were like games and rules that applied, where teams were starting to be created and like a association was created, and where it did get popular when it entered the Asian Cup, the AFC Asian Cup, in 1984, where China got into the finals. Even though it did come in as a runner-up, it did become popular as a whole in China, the sport of football.
That's awesome. So I guess with popularity comes scandal, right? There's always going to be something that kind of comes up. So have there been any scandals that have plagued your team?
For sure, there has been. In the 2000 season in the Shenzhen FC, 6 players were caught with prostitutes in the team hotel. So this internal incident was leaked to the public media, and it became like an open scandal. And ultimately, those players had to make like a public apology, and the coach had to be fired for as like a scapegoat. Like something had to be done, so it was like the coach's fault.
So he got blamed for his own players just
for not watching them well, I
Wow.
guess. So yeah, he was relieved from his position. So I don't know what's happening to those 6 players now, but that was a pretty big incident for that team.
Wow, that's crazy. What about you, Sam? Any big or nothing tops that one, right?
Yeah. There haven't really been any scandals reported about the team, but it's most likely because they're not like world renowned. Nobody really cares or knows about them at all. So I don't think anyone's reported anything. Maybe there was, but it wasn't like told to the public media like it was for yours. But they do have rivalries with like 4 other teams, and most notably, like they're actually all Italian, which is so funny. And most notably, one of them is called, I'm probably butchering this name, Vincenza Calico, and they were actually like founded like next to Venice, like the city like across from them. So it's been a big rivalry, but no scandals yet, luckily for them.
That's nice. So do you think that most of the rivalries are because they're quite close together geographically, or do they just like play in the same league, would you say?
I think it was because they played in the same league for so long, because
Okay.
most of those teams are kind of still in lower leagues,
Okay.
but Venice was also in a lower league too, so I guess the rivalry just continued.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I guess to kind of wrap up, is there anything that's happening in your city that is most popular connecting with sports? I guess maybe I'm trying to reword that. How is what's happening in your city connected to the sport that is most popular? So I guess how has soccer really shaped your city or helped shape your city?
I feel like soccer brought
Football. I'm sorry. Football. Sorry, keep going.
It's okay. Football brought in a lot of like foreign investment, and it brought in like companies that like start their business in China as a whole, and it helped the economy a lot, to the point where like the rates were like going like 10%, 15%, and it also helped the sports industry, where the popularity for football grew immensely now, like even till this day, like the FIFA World Cup, etc.
It's very cool.
Yeah, for my city, I feel like it's been the opposite. Like instead of soccer shaping the city, it's been the city like shaping soccer,
It's
because the awareness of the bad water quality and all of like the things that are happening in the water with Venice, and like their untreated sewage problem and all of this stuff that they're like adding to the canals, and like their awareness of it kind of made the city shift their attention from water sports to soccer, because it's so different and not connected to the canals, and like probably like a distraction from what's happening in the canals that like surround the city. And especially since Venice is literally like an island, it's like shifting their attention away from the water to football and like that whole big culture.
All right. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This has been fantastic. All right, guys, so now that we've pretty much all discussed our respective cities and brought up like all these different, commonalities and similarities, let's just kind of delve deeper into that. All these cities we've chosen football as a sport of our choice. Like Sam and Menyi, why did you guys choose football as the sport to focus on in your city?
Well, once you think of China, I feel like football or soccer is what comes in mind. It's literally the most popular, and it's the most well known in this country, and everywhere else, even foreign countries, know that football is the thing in China.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how I came across for my sports topic.
In Venice, I chose football because it was so, like, water sports were so popular, but now, like, they're shifting their attention to football, so it's really gaining popularity, especially, like, going into the early 2000s. It's been, like a whole, like, kind of cult, like, thing going on now. It's so popular, so that's why I chose it.
It's awesome. Yeah, same with Vietnam. It's just turned into such a national sport, unifying sport, especially kind of even reading up on how it was completely broken apart, once again, like with North and South Vietnam, and then being brought back together at the end of the war. I think it's just funny, like other fun facts. that none of our teams have ever made it to the World Cup.
Where all our teams are pretty terrible,
Yeah.
not to lie.
Yeah.
But they're getting better.
But I think the coolest similarity is that, you know, even with not being amazing sports teams, they're still very popular spectator sports. You know, they're still making all this money with people coming to watch, people watching even on their computers or on the internet, and just trying to access it in any other way. So I think that it shows even in periods of turbulence, they seek to unite a country and give national pride.
For sure, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.